If you struggle with drawing explosions, I'm going to show you that it isn't as hard as it seems. First, I will tell you the most important bullet points to know about an explosion. Number 1 would be that the focal point is always the brightest part of the explosion. Number 2 is really simple. You will always have to draw small objects flying away from the explosion. And number 3 is a really simple one too. I would advise you to draw explosions in darker areas, because if you draw it in bright areas, it is not going to pop as if it was placed in a darker area. But instead of telling this stuff to you, I'm going to show it. So how do we start now? First, I would say we try to draw in the basic outline of an explosion. This doesn't really follow any rhythm. So you could draw it like this, or you could draw it like this. This is usually something you would see in comics or something similar. Or we could even go ahead and draw an atomic mushroom. So basically, except making it look like it extends from your focal point, there really are no fixed rules you have to absolutely follow. One quick tip I would tell you to do is to use the lasso tool more often, especially for coloring, because when I started out with drawing, I actually never used it, and this caused the typical beginner airbrush look, which usually looks really bad. So watch out for the lasso tool, my guys. The next step to do would be to use a base color now. Usually I would recommend a dark red or something similar. Then we can go ahead and add the focal point. With the focal point, you should try to make more than just one shape, because it looks better if you have more. You just have to keep them within a certain area. For example, it would make absolutely no sense if I put a very bright part up there right now. Now, the shadows of an explosion were the part where I personally struggled the most, but usually they are really simple. You could go ahead and use the lasso tool to select your shapes, or you could just draw them in normally if you like that more. Those shadows and explosions typically can be broken down in one very simple shape that looks something like this. How you bend this shape is up to you. Now, this still doesn't look really good, so what I would advise you to do is to pick some colors that look like they would fit into an explosion, like yellow, orange, red, and you just put them in between the spaces of the shadows. Also, you should try to make the edges of the explosion not as sharp as they are right now. Instead, you should try to make it look cloudy. You could take something like a soft round brush or Mark Burnett's cube brush, which I'm using right now, and it should normally work out pretty good then. And another thing I would advise you to do is to try and blend one part of the shadows. So by that you create a gradient that goes from dark to bright. And I think you know how light works. The closer you get to the focal point, the brighter it gets, and the further you go away from the focal point, the darker it gets. So that's the way you should do the gradients. Another thing you could try out is to implement some red or dark orange or something similar in the shadows, because otherwise they would look really monotone. So everything in nature has multiple colors. If you look at skin, you have blue, violet, yellow, orange, red, etc. all combined in the skin. You have to do nearly the same with explosions. You have to put colors that you think would fit there into the explosion. So for the shadows, I'm putting a red and maybe even a dark orange in. I hope I get this point across. Don't just keep the flat colors. You always have to implement some other colors too. You could also try to split the shadow shapes up even more by letting some brighter colors go through them, as you see me doing right now. If you're unhappy with the colors of your explosion, don't worry, because most drawing softwares have a setting where you can play around with brightness, saturation and value. In Clip Studio, you could find it under the shortcut Ctrl+U, and of course at the end you could make your background even darker. Maybe it will look even better then, and you can use a color dodge layer and airbrush the focal point to make it even better. And this is basically everything you need to know to draw an explosion. You could go ahead and refine it even more now, and I hope I got the basic idea of it across. So let's quickly recap what we have done here. First, we drew the outline of an explosion. Then we used a dark red base color. After that, we selected our focal point and drew it in with a bright yellow color. Then we drew in our shadow shapes and put in some colors into the shadow so they don't look so monotone. After that, we drew some brighter colors in between the shadow shapes. Then we blended those shadow shapes at one end to get a gradient from dark to bright. And we used the color dodge layer to make the explosion pop. Then at the end, we played around a bit with the color settings and varied things if needed. And that's it. Hope this video helped you out a bit. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.